by the Faculty of Management and Finance, University of Colombo, in collaboration with the Center for Gender Equality. And for this session, we have invited Dr. Janaki Jayawardana, who is a senior lecturer attached to the Department of History of the University of Colombo, and Dr. Pavithra Jayawardana, who is a lecturer attached to the Department of International Relations. And they will be conducting the session on why gender matters. So this session will last approximately an hour, after which you may raise any questions or comments, and we can have an interactive session upon the completion of sessions. And may I also acknowledge the presence of the other members of the academic staff and the students. And I hope that you would gain some valuable inputs from this session. So without much further ado, I first and foremost again apologize for the slight delay, and may I invite our most distinguished resource persons to conduct the session. Over to you.
What I'm going to do today is, within this hour, I try to talk. I know it's a bit difficult, but as much as possible to make you understand what gender means, one thing, and why does it matter. And I have 2 PowerPoints, and I will try, if I have time, to show you how gender is socially constructed in Sri Lanka based on some of my research, and how that impact the lives of people, right? This is what I want to do, but I'll start without much delay. When gender is socially constructed, what does it mean, right? For many people, humans are categorized into 2 as socially, in terms of sex, that is men and women, or male and the female. So this categorization is understood as, done on the basis of that naturally, biologically, men and women are very different from each other. So we have these 2 social identities called as male and female. So then the problem is, like, when we talk about humans in general, or people, we believe that humans are the most advanced and progressive species on earth, and we assign certain very good qualities to humans. For an example, we believe that humans are rational, unlike the other categories of animals on the earth, right? Based on that, we believe that humans have the qualities to progress, to create civilizations, to challenge the challenges posed by either by nature or society, and overcome them, and then develop themselves into the pinnacle of society, or even in terms of overcoming the natural challenges. So, and based on that, we have political systems, social systems, and economic systems that has been developed through centuries. Then, but the thing is that this understanding itself is very different when it comes to talk about the role and the behavior, and also what can do and can't do in terms of men and women in societies, right? So based on the idea that we naturally, because we are very different from each other, there are things that men can do and women can't do. Naturally, we are sort of born to take certain roles in society. Therefore, our relations with society, and also our status in society, and also our behavior in society is actually organized on that argument, right? it is called sex gender identity. So being a male or female is a natural binary, right? It has fixed biological roots that can't be changed. That is the idea. So based on that identity, that fixed identity, socio-cultural gender was grafted on uh, uh, people people in any society, right? Then the question is, this understanding itself is a question, because being a man or a woman is not determined only by biology or by nature. So becoming a man and woman in a society is something that happens, rather than we are born as men and women. We are born as humans, right? The identity is human. But when, as soon as we differentiate humans into men and women, we have a different identity. And based on that identity, society decide what can or cannot be done by men and women. And also the status we give to these two sex categories are very different from each other. And also the status based on this understanding is also different for men and women. And for example, the qualities that are assigned to men are actually positive qualities, right? Men are strong, they are leaders, they are the ones who can develop the society. So they are the people who can, provide security to family, and also, in terms of developing a nation or a group, men are at the forefront and they are rational. The basic idea is men are more rational and intelligent than women. Therefore, they have this role to protect. And women are seen as more rational than emotional, and therefore their role is different. They are more qualified to take care of children, take care of the family, take care of other services, such as, let's say they are better suited for teaching rather than being an engineer. Likewise, there are so many understandings about men and women in terms of uh, the role and the status in society. And the other thing is that there is a category that who actually can't be put into neither these sex categories, men or women. We think they are unnatural. We call them, that eunuchs, or in Sinhala, people call them ponna, because you can't identify them as a woman or a man. So then, based on how they are born, people think they are unnatural. So then these people, their status, their behavior, and their role in society is different from this natural sex categories that is also there. So the concept gender actually is to understand and to explain why this happen in society. I think I'm going to skip some of these things. If you look at this picture, you may know it's a very well known person in the entire world, former President George Bush. In this website for fun, they have turned him into a female. So the understanding is that the physiology of men and women is very different from each other, and therefore our strengths and weaknesses have been determined by this different physiology. So there is a biologically determined factors that actually separate humans into as men and women, and based on that our behavior, our role, and our power status in society have been determined for a long time. This has a history actually. The Western philosophy from Aristotle onwards is based on the fact the social world can be demarcated into natural and the social, right? So the social world is the world that changes very rapidly. It's actually the where we progress as civilizations, as humans. And the natural world is the family. Family is something does not change, right? The family values, family as an institution does not change in terms of if you look at the economy, politics, or other work in technology in a society. This is our understanding. So therefore, the rational human beings can work for the progress of that rapidly changing social world, and the more emotional human beings can take care of the family, where they have a limited role in terms of nurturing and caring of the family members. Uh, so, uh, this based on this, as I have said in the beginning, the idea is that uh, based on these biological changes, gender is socially grafted on men and women. So, what the concept gender does, it actually question this understanding and try to deconstruct, right? So, the person that familiarized the term gender in the world is Anne Oakley. She has written a book called in 1972, Gender and Society. There, where she tried to explain how this categorization happened and how it has become the natural categorization of the humans, and how it has been accepted by societies everywhere in the world that naturally, biologically, we are worlds apart from each other. And this is something I have, taken from her. And what she argues is, rather than being very different in our physiology, men and women are very much similar to each other. So what she says is, far from falling into two different sex groups, both men and women have the same body ground plan. I think you all will agree with me. If we look at our physiology, we don't have very different features other than external genitalia and the reproductive organs we carry with us. So Anne Oakley's argument is even the anatomical difference of our physiology is more apparent than real, right? So, and speaking of what happens in the process of uh, uh, human born, what she says is that both men and women carry the same reproductive organs inside their body, when conceived. And even though we fall into this female and male female and male characteristics, uh, sex organs and the male sex organs within both men and women's bodies, right? So the female phallus, or the clitoris, is the equivocal of the penis. And also, even though men don't know, they have a remnants of womb inside their body, right? So even that is more apparent than real. So I'm not going to go through this. I think you all know what happens when a human is conceived, right? The physical appearances is determined by, and also reproductive organs are determined by the chromosomes, right? So male and femaleness is actually determined by that. Uh, and then up to 7 weeks, external genitalia is identical in both sexes. It's only after 7 weeks that actually what happened is the each uh, fetus that carries XY or XX chromosome become uh, uh, a female or male by way of becoming the uh, internal reproductive organs uh, more prominent in in the body, inside the body, and then the external genitalia is developed accordingly. Then the other determinant is the hormones. So the hormones are considered as the normal, considered as the the thing is that creating or making normal sex differentiation between uh, men and women. It is the absence of or the presence of male hormone that determines whether the the man or woman carry more feminine or uh, male uh, masculine characteristics. So sometimes in the critical period there may be some failures, and so the embryo will or the fetus will develop as neither male nor female. So I have this picture. If you look at this picture, you can see that behind these women, there's a man in the water, and you see that he has well developed breasts. So things like that can happen. Sometimes people are born, their external genitalia will be male, but internal reproductive organs will be female. So likewise, these changes happen. Then we put these people into the category of neither being female or male. So that doesn't happen in the process of nature, but actually the naming and categorizing happens at the societal level. And the other, Anne Oakley argues, it's not just the biological process, but there are other determinants that actually decide the feminine and masculine characteristics in people. One is the geographical location. She argues that people live in continents are different. Their physiology is different from the people live in islands in terms of height, etc. And then the urban rural differences as well. People live in urban areas. What they do, their economic activities or other activities are different from mostly different from people live in rural areas. So people in rural areas, if we take an example, they are more into like agrarian related economic activities. So their physical strength is much more stronger than people live in urban areas. So sometimes you may see a female live in a rural area is more stronger than a man live in an urban area. Ethnicity is another factor that determines the people's characteristics. For example, in certain ethnic groups, women are not allowed to go out of do anything, right? Or not even to see other people in public. So there are religious beliefs about how to behave. Likewise, ethnicity also has it's a factor that actually determine what people can do or can't do as men and women. And most importantly, she annually points out it is the food intake we take is very important in determining the physical strengths and mental capacity of people. She says that in most societies, when the food is distributed in the family, men are served first and they get the best portion of the food. Women are served last. Even female and male children will be served next. And the most of the time, mother is the last person to eat. So she gets the least nutrients in terms of food intake. So whereas that for physical and mental development, we need a balanced diet. Most of the time, women don't receive such a diet. So therefore, their physical and mental capacity may not be as well as developed as men. So it's not just chromosomes and hormones that determines the physiology of the humans. And more than being very different from each other, men and women, in terms of in terms of the bodily features and in terms of our emotions, uh, we are more common than different. For an example, men also can cry, women also can cry, but where you can cry, how you can cry is actually determined by the society of whether you are a man or a woman. For an example, men don't cry in public. And also, if boys cry hard, mothers and others say, don't cry like a woman or don't cry like a girl. So then they are taught to hold their tears, not to show their emotions. Whereas women can cry in public because it is something acceptable for women. Similarly, men can get angry or even violent in public. That is something accepted by society because they are being men. And whereas if a woman get angry in public, it is considered as being very unfemale and something that shouldn't have happened. So likewise, there are various social scripts about how to behave in a society. So we have to follow these uh, social scripts in order to be accepted by society. Therefore, what we actually do is we do the things according to the given social scripts by society. So, if you look at I have a few things here, right? In terms of sexuality, in terms of behavior, and in terms of the roles, we have a very different socially assigned tasks and responsibilities to do. And if you step out of that responsibility and do something differently, then you get criticized. Like for an example, one of the female political leaders at the grassroots level I have interviewed in the southern area once, she told me, if you are into politics, you have to behave like a man, otherwise you can't survive. And if you behave like a man, then also you are getting criticized, not being a proper woman. And she told me that at her father's funeral, she had to uh, take care of everything, and she didn't have time even to cry. So she didn't cry, and uh, uh, rather than praising her for taking that responsibility to her hand and arranging everything in a in an efficient manner, she has been criticized for not crying at her father's funeral. So this is how we value and assess men and women. So in terms of decision making, either in private or public uh, spheres, what is believed is that women are rather managers than decision makers. So even sometimes in the family, you may see that mother is, doing things and, making decisions. But apparently, if you ask, the last word is always a man's word. So without consulting your father or brother or someone responsible male in the family, it's very difficult to make decisions. Then in terms of access to resources also, we see a difference, right? If you look at most of the societies in the world, it is believed that women, in terms of property, access to property, men are the legitimate heirs of property because of the idea that they are the breadwinners, they are the protectors. Whereas women may not have, access to resources in terms of even revenue, right? In terms of employment also, what you can see is sometimes, the same job, you may hire men and women, but there will be less salary will be lesser than for a man. And also, if you look at the 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 right to control your own body, right? When to get married or when to have children. In many societies, women do not have the right to make decision about those things. So it is basically most of the time men who decide when to give their, women, female children in the family, marriage, or even, after marrying. Soon people will ask, when are you going to have children, etc. Right? More than that, what I see is the issue is social worth. I mean, this is what the feminist movement is also question, right? If you look at the society today, or even in ancient times, a society cannot exist without men. Similarly, a society cannot exist without women. But then the problem is why one category is given prominence and the value than the other category if the both categories are mutually important for the existence of a society. So to finish this, there are three understandings about what is gender, right? One is ethnomethodologist explanation of gender. The other is materialist feminist view of gender, and also then post-modernist view of gender. Both ethnomethodologist explanation and postmodern view explains gender is something we do rather than we have. It is not primordial. We are not born with our gender, right? We are born as humans, but the moment a child is born, the very first question is whether it's a boy or a girl. And then and there, the process of categorizing a human into a man or a woman, and the social process of shaping that person into a man or a woman begins, right? Then they are given toys, clothes, different from each other, from the family, from the society, from the school, and later on your workplace, you hear how different you are and how you should behave differently. Otherwise, it's not acceptable. So, gender is something that we do rather than we have. And there are normative practices in society where always reiterate that you are a boy, you are a girl, so behave accordingly. Then there are citational practices and linguistic practices. For example, I know for a long time we have in this society, I don't hear it very often now, but Ganunge Nuwana Handimite digger. So in literally what it means that the knowledge of women stretched as far as the length of the handle of the kitchen is, right? So their place is kitchen. This understandings like that. Then there are citational practices. No, women don't climb trees, men don't change nappies, etc., etc. Then there are normative practices to actually value and assess what you do as women's work and men's work. So gender is actually not something we bring with our birth. It is an attribution. It is something given by the society, and it is a performance. So we do gender in order to maintain the sex differences actually produced in societies. Therefore, doing gender is different from culture to culture, country to country, civilization to civilization. Doing gender is different even within a same group. For example, being a single girl will be determined by where that girl is. For being a Tamil woman or a girl is determined by where that girl is. If she's brought up in a in a society other than in Sri Lanka, her behavior, her attitudes, her ways are different from a single or Tamil girl in Sri Lanka. Likewise, so gender intersect with other things in society, and also like I have said at the beginning, gender intersect with caste, religion, with nationality, ethnicity, etc. So therefore, even though we believe that we have this idea in our consciousness that men and women behave in the same manner everywhere in the world, or even in among your own group or in your country, it is actually not correct, because how we do gender is determined by the factors that I have talking about. So it's not only we do gender, but also the humans get read by the other humans the way we do that performance, right? For example, if we see like I'm talking about Sinhala girls, if we see a girl wearing a very modest dress, cover herself properly, and walk and talk in a very very quiet manner, that girl is sort of understood as a good girl. Whereas a girl, if she wears a short, revealing dress and laughs loud and walk and talk in a very busy manner, people think that girl is a bad girl or westernized girl. So we have all these social scripts about us. Same with the boys too, right? If a boy is more, sort of exhibiting certain manners that are assigned with feminine characteristics, that boy is not considered as a man or a male. So we call them organic wage, right? Likewise. So always that for performance is being read by the society and judged by the society. And if you don't behave according to the given social scripts, you're punished. So there is a regulation about gendered behavior, practices, and roles. So we know if we go out of the line and behave differently, there is always a punishment either from family, school, or your workplace, right? So therefore, what people try to do is always to, to uh, uh, behave according to the societal understanding of what a man or a woman is. So best example can be given is like there are many people who actually have same-sex tendencies in the world, but since it is sort of understood as a crime that can be punished by the penal code in many countries, and it goes against religious behavior and societal norms, they act as they are, they belong to a so-called normal sex categories, right? And they try to conceal their sex identity because they know if you come out of with your sex identity, you are going to get punished either by the law or by society. So gender is not something that we do. That doing is actually read by the society and judged by the society, and also there is always a punishment if you behave differently. So then why do we do that? Why can't we get away with that? That is very important to understand, because as um, this prominent feminist thinker Gail Rubin has explained, sex gender system is something that actually is the basic principle rule that organize the society, right? If you do away with gender, it becomes a problem. The same thing is explained by the materialist feminism. What they say is that these are not just sex categories that describe what men and women can do or not or can't do, right? It's not just about a biological human's behavior, right? Even the state is also gendered. Social order is gendered. So gender is the main principal thing that organizes the society. And what Gail Rubin pointed out by way of explaining the Western societies, what she said is that in order to maintain the capitalist economies, capitalist systems, uh, it capitalism works hand in hand with patriarchy in those societies, right? So I don't think I have very much time to explain this, but she actually pointed out was it's by way of exploiting women's labor through kin systems, through marriage, that men have been able to go out and perform duties outside the home, right? It's by way of exploiting women's labor. Women work from early morning to midnight without being paid. Their labor is exploited and extracted by through the contract of marriage. So men have this, power to exploit the women's labor. So she calls it trafficking women, right? So that is actually happens through the marriage. A marriage is actually a political and economic alliance between two groups of men. She this is her explanation of how sex gender system works in society and why we can't do away with gender. So finally, uh, gender matters because the existence of a gendered social order depends on gender itself. And also, gender, as I have said, is an interactive process. So being a male or a female is actually always defined in relation to each other. But in societies, always women are defined in relation to men. So that is why I use the word androcentric here. And also it is gender that decide the power relations in the family and society between men and women as humans. So these categories are, as I have said at the beginning, mutually constitutive, mutually essential for the existence of a society, but not equally significant. One category is valued over the other. So the relationship between men and women is related to social context. The relation between them is existing in a class-like relationship. So the relationship is not equal. Power relation is not equal. Men are men have more power than women. So the categories can't be mutual. So one category is over the other. And again, I have explained this. We do gender because we always know there is a punishment available if we cross the norms. Then what is gender? So gender is a sociological concept, and that concept explains men and women, or not being men or women, are actually social categories than natural categories based on the biological differences. And gender categories are not homogeneous, as I have said. Gender is lived and experienced differently. It depends on where you live, what is your ethnicity, what is your religion or caste, etc. So, and gender constructs inequality and marginalized people. So women as a large or numerically large community is have unequal access to politics, culture, or economy in many societies. And people who actually don't belong to either these two so-called natural categories are more marginalized than other categories. So finally, gender is not determined by biologically because of sexual characteristics we have, but it is constructed socially. So it is because it is the central organizing principle of societies, and it governs the process of production and reproduction. Like what all the systems we have, political, economic, and social systems are, and how they how these structures work is determined by this categorization of people into men and women. So that is why gender matters. I will stop this here. Any questions, or should I go into the other presentation? How much time I have? Hello?
Rajesh.
Dr. Pavithra?
Dr. Janaki, you go for the second one, and then I can just briefly discuss.
Should I go for the second one as well?
If you think so, do you have another presentation?
No.
Dr. Janaki?
I mean, no. I think I have explained the concept, what it means and why it matters. Right. So what I want to give you an example, how it is constructed and why it matters. Right. In terms of
I
nationality. Should I go for that?
I do have some examples for the university life, Dr. Janaki. What
We want to
would be
go
the
through
best
that.
to do?
I think you better speak first and then I'll go again, no?
Okay, okay.
Okay, Pavi, go ahead.
Yeah, thank you, Dr. Janaki. Right, I'll turn on my video. Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining. Also, thank you for Rajista and Professor Arosh and management faculty for organizing this, and the gender cell, of course. And also, I must say that I'm honored to share this platform with Dr. Janaki. So what I thought I'll do is to take you through some of my personal experiences in living in the university, in terms of the moments that I've faced, that when I look back, that I think those are very gendered moments. And these types of moments we every day to day we face. But I thought, because we have some students here as well as some staff members, to sort of try to understand what Dr. Janaki was explaining, that gender is a social construction through our day-to-day lives. So I thought, I mean, I looked back, and I just came up with a couple of experiences that I have faced. So I'll share that with you very briefly. So firstly, I remember when I was an undergraduate, couple of years back, not couple of years back, but years back. So I was also from the University of Colombo and from the Faculty of Arts. I remember, we had ragging, of course, and then we were supposed to wear, as female students, we were supposed to wear long dresses, and boys had a dress code. They had to tuck in their shirts and wear smartly. And I wonder, when I look back, for the fact that I even didn't question that ordering at that period, and I thought it's normal, right? But when I look at it now, I understand that even that dress code, I mean, there was a very convincing discourse around that. After school, we were coming to the university, and we had some perceptions about the university, and there was this subculture that we trying to protect and preserve it inside universities, and within which we're supposed to respect our seniors. When you respect, you also mean right, you don't question your seniors. The flip side of the respect is you don't question them, you follow them, right? So even this dress code, when I look back at it now, when, as Dr. Janaki was explaining, is a very good example to understand that gender is social constructed. You have this long dress, and it shows that the stereotyped way of an ideal woman should be, right? You have to wear these long dresses to show that you're innocent, you're pure, you're also dependent, versus when you look at men, they have to wear this in a smart way, as when Dr. Janik was also saying that that men are always ready to take up responsibilities, to go out, to lead, they're strong, that sort of two connotations for those dress codes. But I wonder, in my case, I didn't even ask, I didn't even realize that this is gendered at that time, even though I understand it now. So what is the reason? I think is because that genderedness is deeply rooted in our minds, by the society. So why gender matter in these types of things? That prevented me from asking or questioning this system. What actually, I mean, I might have thought that I was a victim of this, hierarchical order. But then on the other hand, because I didn't ask that question, I have also become a part of part of that norm and my silent consent, that I was actually afraid. Even I understood that at that point in first year, I wouldn't still ask, right? Because there's this sense of fear to be punished, because it is something that is accepted somehow by everyone, and that you have to adhere to that, right? So through that, you give it a silent consent. So when you do that, why gender matters, why gender sensitivity matters, is because not only that will allow you to be prevented from these types of, unfair and unjust societal practices, but it will also prevent you by becoming a perpetrator in reproducing such disparities for the next generation, right? So my silent consent, when I look back, I feel like, I have given the consent to continue this order. So in that sense, that's one of my experiences to share with you, that we have some students here, I think, um, um, uh, how this, gender disparity uh, takes place in our societies. Now, another example is that, so I'm from the Faculty of Arts. Now we have obviously at least more than 70% a female population. So during my university days, we had different, student movements. We had unions, we had political student organizations, but we female students we could never become a part of those processes. So what generally happens is, boys who are in these unions, they make decisions at night in their hostels about the future of the student movement, and they'll come to the faculty the other day and would let us know their decisions, right? So even though we have about 70%, more than 70% female community, I mean, I always had a natural curiosity, a natural desire to know what is happening in politics, what are the power relations, how can we engage in such processes, etc., etc. But my willingness as a female was never respected, and there was actually no avenue for me to engage in such processes. So, well, there might even be some avenues, but I never realized that I could actually open my own path in getting engaged in those movements. And when I look back at it now, I understand that perhaps it's because I also thought that they, I mean, myself as a female, we are not meant to make decisions when it comes to things like politics, things like student politics. Instead, boys or men would make decisions for us because they're more rational than us. They're supposed to be good in making decisions about what we want as a community, etc., etc. So it's really struck me when I reflect back that we even didn't ask these questions from our colleagues, that why do you discuss these things in your hostels at night? Why can't we have a conversation? We have over 70% female population in the faculty, so why can't we do this together? We didn't even ask those questions, so we were silently accepting it and thinking that it's how it is, right? So so why gender matters, why gender sensitivity matters in these types of moments is because otherwise the processes and procedures through which policies and decisions are being made are not inclusive, right? So if you are insensitive for gender, and then a group of men would come together and make decisions, and those decisions are again would be imposed on us, but we have never been a part of those processes. So gender sensitivity really allows us to be curious about the processes, on one hand on outputs, but also more importantly about the processes through which you end up making decisions and making certain outputs. The third example is not from my student life, but when I'm a staff member now. So last year I had a conversation with one of my colleagues, a man, and we had this conversation that I was outside Sri Lanka doing my higher studies, and when I came back, we were having a cup of tea and we're talking, and he was asking me how was my PhD life, how's my higher education life. So I was telling him the struggles I went through because I have a kid, so managing all this stuff were actually very challenging. So I was explaining to him that it was challenging, and then he was like, see, he was actually appreciating me. It was very interesting what he said. He said, well, finally somehow you got your PhD, but you also could protect your family, which is the most important thing, right? So he saw that I'm completing my PhD as a success because in the first place I could save my family, right? So on the other hand, what he meant is that for women, you can be in your career, you can be in very higher up positions, but if you do not have a family, or if your family is not stable and that you don't invest in your family, your success is not a real success. So that kind of a discourse would really is unfair. So what gender matters is because otherwise it's very unfair, right? Because we all have different lives, we have different desires. This what gender sensitivity allows us to do is to look at humans and their lives in a more empathetic way and a more contextual way, rather than trying to put them into stereotype categories and roles. Dr. Janaki was explaining that we all are assigned, we have roles assigned to us. So in my case, I was perceived as a person whose first role is to have a stable family, and any other success counts next. So my question is, what if, I chose to have a family, but cannot other women be there who don't want to have a family, right? So because we're different. And in that case, who decides those parameters of success is a question that we get this confused with sameness. We have parameters that are set based on the assumptions of sameness. So a woman's achievements are always being compared with men, as Dr. Janaki was talking about this, looking at both genders uh, in comparison, not in comparison, but you look at women in relative to men. So this actually happened when I was a staff member, but these types of things, it takes place within the university. So I think as students, what you can do is to be mindful about gender, and in your own actions being more empathetic in the way that you behave and in the way that you treat to your colleagues and others in a very gender sensitive way. Dr. Janaki, that's all from me.
Yeah, it's 5:37, and should I I talk a bit and then let's ask them question. No? The next presentation, I think I'm not going to explain it all, but I will tell you, discuss a few about it. This is also based on my research. So what I want to discuss was that, that when we understand the men and women in Sri Lankan society, it's always in relation to the nation or ethnicity, not as individuals, right? And also we have an understanding that men and women, I'm talking about Sinhala society, behaved in the same manner for a long period of history. We say that we have a 2,500 years of history, and within that history, the gender roles, gendered behavior or practices have not changed much. But if you look at the categories, sex, sexuality, gender, they are not ahistorical. They have a history. So what I wanted to discuss here was our understanding of men and women in societies today is actually does not have that ancient historical roots, but the norms, practices, and ideologies actually were created in early 20th century and late 19th century due to two forces. One is the colonialism and the other is the nationalism that has emerged in order to do away with colonialism. So both these processes have had a very profound impact upon deciding what men and women in society are, or even who cannot be fit into category. For an example, it was in the British common law that in the late 19th century declared that homosexuality in Sri Lanka is a crime, right? And in our society, we have an ideology to tell that who actually we are, right? Who the Sinhalese are. So I'm not going to explain much, but I'll relate to this picture and the next one. This is the picture in an activity drawn by our Sinhala and Tamil students when I asked them to draw a picture of a native man and a woman. So the woman is cladding an osari, having her hair as a knot, and then the man is in this national suit. Similarly, you can see that Tamil students have this very idea that how the Sinhalese and Tamils should look or must look. But if you look at the society today, you don't see that as a reality. But this is the ideological Sinhala or Tamil man and woman reside in our mind. Partly this has happened due to the colonial knowledge formation of the natives in Sri Lanka, which I'm not going to talk much, but what I want to talk to show you here is that when the British came to Sri Lanka, or even the Europeans, they actually ridicule the looks of men and women in Sri Lanka. They say men look more feminine than masculine. They say that the difference between men and women is the absence of the beard or the mustache. And they say that they are disgusted with the looks of the Sinhalese men because they look more feminine than masculine. So same with the other sex categories as well. I'm going to quickly show you some pictures to show that how certain people looked in the 19th century. In terms of ethnicity also, there was no much difference between the Sinhalese and the Tamils, etc. So this is a Sinhala man and a Tamil man. You can see long hair with a beard. The upper part of the body is not covered, and they wear a short dress. This picture is actually a boy climbing a coconut tree, but from behind he looks more like a woman. So this is a Canadian girl or woman. You can see the difference between the dress we understand as the Canadian dress today and at those times. Sorry, I think I'll go over this. And this is a low country Sinhalese boy. So wearing a European coat and a sarong and wearing that tortoiseshell comb on his hair. This is a low country woman wearing a kambaya and hatte. So these are two Sinhala and Tamil women, identical dress. So this is low country man and a woman. And there were people like this also. Certain low caste men and women were not allowed to cover the upper part of the body in the even in the early 20th century. So this is a picture of a village. You can see that, you know, women have not covered their upper part of the body. Children are naked. Some have a you know, cloth covering the upper part of the body. But in late 19th century, Anagarika Dharmapala has written a pamphlet called Gihidina Charyawa, and in that he said the dress of the Sinhala women should be ohori or the Indian sari. This I took from an advertisement in the 1915 in a small booklet, which it says Osari hevat Arya Sinhala andum. So the dress has given a new identity as Arya Sinhala dress at this time, because Dharmapala propagated the idea that Sinhalese were Aryans. So they are different from the rest of the ethnic categories in Sri Lanka. So these are the pictures. You can see some ladies wearing osari in the same time period. Since they didn't have a proper footwear, they wore shoes and socks with the osari. But if you look at the history of the dress in the region, actually, it's not just Sri Lanka. Widely in South Asia and even Southeast Asia, the dress of the men and women was the same. What we call sari today was the dress of both men and women at that time. You can see different dress patterns in different periods in Asia. This the cloth was garment was called satika or salua in Sinhala. So sometimes it was worn up to the ankle, sometimes it was shorter than the above knee, and the head gear and the other accessories all were identical for both men and women. There was no underwear or blouse to cover the upper part. The blouse was introduced to the South Asian culture by the Persians in later some centuries, and underwear actually was introduced by the colonialism. So what gaze of the colonials, that from behind you can't identify whether it's a man or a woman, is because of this. And our understanding of nudity was very different at that time. It was in the colonial period that uncovering your body became a shame and barbaric practice. So what the Sri Lankans also believed, to be civilized, you have to follow certain manners and patterns of the colonial people. So our way of understanding, who we have changed a lot during late 19th and early 20th century due to this. So the role of women, I got this from a newspaper in the 1960s. The idea that it is women who are the reserves or the vessels of carrying the culture of a nation. So to protect the Sinhala identity, women should not change. That was the idea that actually developed in this time, which I can't talk a lot, but what we can see is that the identity of the Sinhala or Tamil as ethnic groups or Muslims, and also what the women and men should do for the nation or for their own ethnic group was actually determined by how men and women were understood in this period, and most of these have actually continued for today, but we think that these practices, norms, and ideologies and ideals came from a very ancient time. Best example is the marriage, I think. Before the British came, we practiced both polygamy and polyandry and monogamy. There were monogamous marriages, eka vivahaya, that was understood as diga and binna, and different practices. And when then one woman was allowed to marry several men, or one man was allowed to marry several women. So the legitimacy of the children, and also maintenance of the children, how to divide the property, all that was decided by this liberal marriage system. And then the British said Sinhala marriage is the most uncivilized form of marriage in Sri Lanka, and they have introduced several ordinances to change this, bigamous and bigamous marriage practices to monogamous marriage practices. And there was no state intervention in marriage. Marriages were not registered. So at any moment, a man was allowed to leave the marriage, or woman was allowed to leave the marriage. So it was mostly like what we call living together. So what happened was, people married several times in their lifetime before settling with one partner. So all that was changed due to, the colonial way of understanding was introduced into our society. So what I wanted to say was, like, our way of understanding who men and women in society was very different in ancient times or pre-colonial times. That's why, so this shows that how gender, sex, or sexuality is constructed according to context. Therefore, it doesn't have a very long, permanent sense of identity uh, in terms of gender or sexuality. Right? I think I'll stop here. We still have some time. Are we going to allow to ask some questions?
Yes, madam, sure.
Yeah, okay.
Thank you very much, madams, for that very interesting session. And actually, I think it built awareness of gender issues. So if the participants have any questions or any comments, you may raise them now. Make this an opportunity to clarify any questions or doubts that you have.
Yes, sir. So thank you. It was a great session, madam, and I think I should agree with the previous speaker, like who said that they stayed in silence and they couldn't, like, that was also welcoming the inequality problem, and like that the same theory I think applies to ragging as well in the universities, and like even the ladies in our batches, they got ragged, like ragged as in more mentally than physically. And then in the previous years it has continued because people who were against it were also silent. And I think but now the culture has changed for the better, because the majority spoke up against it, like they were against it and they spoke up for it. And then now I think we cannot see a rag happening in the future of local universities, and that's actually great for both genders, and which gives both genders an equal opportunity to excel in university. I think that's a good step taken from university students. And yes, as that's just an addition for this session. Thank you very much, speakers. Yes, it was very important. Yeah, very important.
6 now.
Yeah, right. So thank you very much, Dr. Janaki Jayawardana and Dr. Pavithra Jayawardana, for conducting this session. And I must definitely acknowledge Professor Arosha Adhikaran and the Center for Gender Equality for organizing this, and also the Faculty of Management and Finance. And let me also acknowledge Mr. Sanjan Vanikasekar and Mr. Harit Dupgamage, third year students of the Faculty of Management and Finance, who helped us in organizing this event. So with that note, I conclude this session, and I must thank all the participants, and definitely most importantly, the two resource persons for taking their valuable time to share with us their knowledge and experiences. And I'm sure it was a benefit to all of us. And let me apologize for any technical issues or any, there was a slight delay and there were some technical issues. And for that, I do apologize for any inconvenience caused. Thank you very much and have a pleasant evening.